All right, so this is just basic accounting for fatty acids. So we're going to be looking at degradation of a fatty acid. So we can just start off with, let's say, a 12 carbon chain. So in order to start this process of oxidation, you need to activate your fatty acid into acyl-CoA. So that reaction will cost you 2 ATP. And then now you want to calculate how many acetyl-CoA is produced. So acetyl-CoA is a 2-carbon chain. So if you start off with 12 carbons, you're going to end up with 6 acetyl-CoA. So now you want to count how many rounds of beta oxidation this goes through. So the rounds will be one less of however many acetyl-CoA that you form. And we can kind of sketch this out. So here is a fatty acid chain. So it's a 6-carbon chain. And remember, acetyl-CoA looks like that, sort of. So if you want to cleave this, you're going to go through 1 round and then 2 rounds. And so now you end up with 1, 2, 3 acetyl-CoA. But you only went through 2 rounds of beta oxidation. So same goes for here. You had 6 acetyl-CoA, but you're only going through 5 rounds. And then the number of NADH and FADH2 that you produce for beta oxidation, you produce 1 of each per 1 round. So 1 round of beta oxidation will give you 1 NADH and 1 FADH2. So if you have 5 rounds, you're going to end up with 5 NADH and 5 FADH2. And this accounting method can also be applied for the synthesis of fatty acids, but your numbers would look different. So for synthesis, you would actually make 2 NADPH per round instead of just 1, like NADH. But just keep in mind your electron carriers are going to be different, and the numbers might be slightly different as well, but the method of accounting will be the same. Okay, so now you have the 6 acetyl-CoA that you produced, and this can get fed into the citric acid cycle. So if you remember, 1 turn of the citric acid cycle will give you 3 NADH and 1 FADH2. And you have 6 acetyl-CoA, so you're going to be turning the citric acid cycle 6 times. So you can do 6 times 3 to give you 18 NADH, and then 6 times 1 to give you 6 FADH2. And then you also form some ATP from the citric acid cycle. It's not a lot, but it is some. So if you remember, you form 1 ATP per 1 round of the citric acid cycle. And again, since we have 6 acetyl-CoA, you'll be having 6 rounds of the citric acid cycle to give you 6 ATP. Okay, so all of these NADH, FADH2s that you make, these electron carriers, they can go into the electron transport chain. And that's where you'll be generating the majority of the ATP that you make. So you can just count up however many NADH and FADH2 that you made. So we have 5 plus 18, and that will give you 23 NADH. And then you have 5 plus 6, which would give you 11 FADH2. And if you remember, 1 NADH will give you about 2.5 ATP. And then 1 FADH2 will give you about 1.5 ATP. And again, this is the electron transport chain. Okay, so then if you have 23 NADH, you can just multiply that by 2.5 ATP, and that will be 57.5 ATP. And then 11 FADH2 times 1.5 ATP will give you 16.5 ATP. So as you can see, that's where the majority of your ATP is coming from. So now to find the net ATP, you can just add up all of the ATP that you form. So you form some through the electron transport chain, do the citric acid cycle. So we can go ahead and add those up. So you have 6 ATP plus 57.5 ATP plus 16.5. And that gives you a total of 80 ATP. But remember, we had the cost to activate your fatty acid. So 80 ATP minus the 2 ATP that it took is going to give you 78 ATP. And that's your net. Okay, so that's just the general process for accounting. I suggest going through this with different fatty acid chain numbers. But if you look right here, this is just kind of the layout that you would follow. First, find out how much, how many acetyl-CoA that you're making, and then how many rounds it will take to get to that number of acetyl-CoA. And then from there, you can determine however many NADH or FADH2 is produced from the beta oxidation part, and then however many is produced from the citric acid cycle part. And then you can calculate how much ATP is produced from the citric acid cycle, and then how many is produced from the electron transport chain. So be sure to remember to include what happens in the electron transport chain and the citric acid cycle, because those all feed into it. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions.